The knocking started before Lucas Mercer found the door. 3 slow thuds, deep beneath the rain-soaked earth. Not thunder, not falling branches. Something underneath him was knocking back. Ghost froze first. The German shepherd stood motionless in the middle of the Ozark Forest Trail, rainwater dripping from the black edges of his sable coat, while wind hissed through the pine trees around them. His ears lifted sharply. Amber eyes locked on the mud below his paws. Then came the sound again. Thud, thud, thud. Lucas stopped walking. The beam from his flashlight trembled slightly across the storm-dark woods, catching crooked cedar trunks and wet stone glistening beneath the downpour. Ghost, he muttered quietly. What is it? The dog didn't bark. That was what unsettled Lucas most. Military K9s barked when they sensed danger. Ghost only went silent when he sensed something worse. Somewhere above the mountains, thunder rolled low like distant artillery. The smell of wet soil and rotting pine filled the cold October air as rain soaked through Lucas's canvas jacket and ran down the scar along his jawline. He adjusted the old emergency radio clipped to his belt. Static crackled weakly. 40 minutes earlier, while driving the backroads outside Jasper, Arkansas, he'd picked up a broken distress signal on an unused military frequency. No coordinates, no voice, just static, and one sentence buried beneath it. Please, somebody hear us, then silence. Lucas had spent 14 years in Marine recon before retirement, hollowed him out into a quieter kind of man. He knew what panic sounded like. This signal carried something else. Exhaustion, the kind that had already given up hope someone was coming. Ghost suddenly lunged forward. His paws slammed into the mud beside a cluster of moss-covered rocks. Dirt sprayed violently into the rain. Lucas stepped closer, flashlight cutting through the storm. At first it looked like nothing. Just earth, roots, stone, then metal reflected beneath the mud. A flat iron surface buried under decades of soil. Lucas's stomach tightened. No way. Ghost kept digging harder, muscles flexing beneath soaked fur, claws scraping rusted steel. With a sound that made Lucas's skin crawl. Within seconds, the outline emerged. A hatch. Circular. Military grade. Half hidden beneath the forest floor like the mountain itself had tried to swallow it. Rainwater streamed across the faded symbol stamped into the metal. An eagle. Almost erased by rust. Lucas crouched slowly, wiping mud away with his sleeve. Beneath the corrosion, he could barely make out old government lettering. Property of U.S. Army Corps Engineering Division. His pulse slowed. Not from calm. From instinct. Ghost stepped back from the hatch and released a low whine deep in his throat. Lucas had heard that sound only once before. Afghanistan. Kandahar Province. The morning they found civilians trapped beneath a collapsed school building after mortar fire. Ghost had smelled them through 12 feet of concrete. Lucas looked around the forest again. Endless black trees swayed under the storm. No roads nearby. No cabins. No lights. Nothing human for miles. Yet beneath his boots sat a military bunker no map had marked. Another sharp burst of static exploded from the radio on his belt. Lucas flinched. Then a voice slipped through the interference. Tiny. Distorted. Almost childlike. Dad. The signal died instantly. Ghost barked once this time. Loud. Violent. Then he turned toward the hatch and growled at the darkness below it as if something down there had just moved. Lucas grabbed the rusted wheel lock and pulled hard. At first nothing happened. Metal groaned beneath decades of pressure while rain hammered against the trees overhead. He planted both boots into the mud and pulled again. Suddenly the seal broke with a horrific sucking sound, like the mountain exhaling after holding its breath for years. Cold air rushed upward from the darkness beneath them. Air that smelled wrong. Not just mold. Not just rust. Something older. Trapped. Ghost immediately backed away from the opening, hackles raised high along his spine. Lucas pointed the flashlight downward. Concrete stairs disappeared deep underground into absolute blackness. Then the beam caught something halfway below. Tiny handprints, painted in faded blue along the bunker wall. Child-sized. One after another descending into the dark. Lucas stared without blinking. Rain dripped from his hair onto the steel hatch beside him, while somewhere below, faint and trembling beneath the static of the storm, music began to play. Soft. Distant. A lullaby. The lullaby drifted upward through the bunker stairwell, like something too gentle to belong in a place this cold. Ghost refused to move. The German shepherd stood at the edge of the open hatch, paws rigid in the mud, rain dripping from his muzzle while his eyes stayed fixed on the darkness below. Lucas tightened his grip on the flashlight. "Easy, boy." His voice came out quieter than he intended. The song crackled softly beneath layers of static, warped by time and distance, but the melody itself was unmistakable. A child's music box tune. Slow, fragile, completely impossible. No electricity had reached these mountains in hours after the storm rolled through. Yet something down there still had power. Lucas descended first. The concrete steps groaned beneath his boots as cold air wrapped around him like wet cloth. The deeper he went, the quieter the storm above became until the rain was nothing more than a faint tapping far overhead. Ghost followed reluctantly behind him, claws clicking against the old concrete. The beam from Lucas's flashlight swept across narrow bunker walls stained with age and moisture. Water dripped steadily from exposed pipes overhead. The air smelled of rust, mildew, and old fuel left too long in sealed rooms. Then the stairwell opened into a corridor. Lucas stopped breathing for a second. The bunker was larger than it had any right to be. Hallways stretched deep beneath the mountain, lined with heavy steel doors marked with faded military numbers. Dust covered everything, yet not evenly. That was the first thing Lucas noticed. Some footprints disturbed the dirt. Small ones, barely visible, like someone had walked these halls long after the bunker should have been abandoned. Ghost lowered his head immediately, nose moving through the stale air. A low rumble formed in his chest. Lucas turned toward the source of the lullaby. At the end of the corridor sat a child's radio on a folding table beneath a flickering emergency light. The music stopped the instant his flashlight touched it. Silence swallowed the bunker again. Lucas approached slowly. The radio looked ancient. Yellowed plastic, rust around the speaker. But beside it sat something stranger. A bowl of soup, still wet. Steam no longer rose from it, but the surface had not hardened yet. Lucas froze. Someone had been here recently. Ghost suddenly barked sharply behind him. Lucas spun around. The beam caught dozens of photographs taped crookedly across the bunker wall. Families, children, smiling men in military uniforms. Most were faded nearly white with age, but one picture near the center looked newer than the rest. A little girl around 7 years old stood beside a German shepherd puppy wearing a red bandana around its neck. Written beneath the photo in black marker were the words, "Wait for Dad." Lucas felt something tighten in his stomach. The bunker temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Then he saw the calendar hanging nearby. October 1997. Every day after the 15th had been crossed out in thick red ink except one. November 3rd. Circled over and over until the paper nearly tore through. Ghost stepped closer to the wall and sniffed the photograph of the little girl. His ears flattened instantly. Lucas had seen that reaction before too. Scent recognition. Somehow, impossibly, Ghost smelled something familiar here. A sudden metallic bang echoed deep within the bunker. Lucas whipped around toward the darkness ahead. One of the steel doors farther down the corridor slowly creaked shut on its own. Ghost lunged forward immediately, barking now, deep and aggressive. Lucas followed, pulse hammering. "Hello." His voice disappeared into the underground maze. No answer came back. Only the sound of dripping water somewhere far below them. The corridor narrowed as they moved deeper underground. Lucas passed overturned crates labeled emergency rations and water purification tablets. Old blankets still rested neatly on cots inside an open sleeping area, as if whoever lived here expected to come back after stepping out for only a moment. Then his flashlight caught another detail that made him stop cold. Tallies scratched into the concrete wall beside one bunk. Hundreds of them. Day after day after day. Lucas counted quickly under his breath. His chest tightened. Nearly 11 months. Someone had survived down here almost a year. Ghost suddenly began whining. Not at the hallway ahead. At the ceiling. Lucas lifted the flashlight slowly upward. More drawings covered the concrete overhead in faded crayon. Stick figures holding hands. Mountains. A dog. And one sentence written shakily in blue wax near a ventilation pipe. Is it morning yet? Lucas stared at the childish handwriting while silence pressed around him from every direction. Then came the rehook. A soft click echoed behind them. Lucas turned instantly. The radio back in the corridor had switched on again by itself. Static crackled violently through the bunker speakers. Then a weak voice emerged beneath the interference. Older this time. A woman, trembling. If anybody hears this, please, do not let them die down here alone. The transmission cut out mid-sentence. Every emergency light in the bunker flickered once, twice. Then somewhere deeper beneath the mountain, a generator slowly roared back to life. The generator's growl rolled through the bunker floor like an old machine waking from a nightmare. Dim emergency bulbs flickered overhead one by one, spilling weak amber light down the corridor. Ghost backed closer to Lucas immediately, ears pinned flat now, his breathing uneven. The dog was not reacting like a tracker hunting danger. He was reacting like something here disturbed him on a deeper level. Lucas slowly unclipped the pistol holster beneath his jacket, not because he expected a fight, but because every instinct military service had burned into him was screaming the same warning. Leave. But another instinct pushed harder. Somebody had lived down here. Somebody had waited. And somehow, after almost 30 years, the bunker still had power. Lucas moved deeper into the corridor while the generator rumbled louder somewhere below. The stale air carried a faint electrical smell, now mixed with damp concrete, and something older beneath it all. Dust drifted through the weak lights. Overhead like smoke. Ghost suddenly stopped beside an overturned metal cart near the wall. His nose pressed against a small object half buried beneath debris. Lucas crouched beside him and brushed the dirt away carefully. A cassette tape. The plastic case was cracked with age, but written across masking tape in faded black marker were 4 words. Play if the lights return. Lucas stared at it for several seconds. The generator hummed louder. Somewhere water dripped steadily through the bunker pipes. Then another sound reached him. A soft rhythmic tapping. Not mechanical. Human. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. Coming from somewhere farther underground. Ghost heard it too. His head snapped toward the lower hallway instantly. Lucas slid the cassette into the small player beside the radio. Static crackled violently before a man's exhausted voice finally emerged. If this recording starts, then the backup generator finally came online again. The voice coughed hard. My name is Staff Sergeant Daniel Reeves, United States Army Engineering Corps. Lucas felt his pulse quicken. Reeves continued slowly, breathing unevenly between sentences. If anybody finds this bunker, you need to understand we did not come here to hide from war. We came here because they told us help was coming. Ghost paced nervously beside the radio while the recording continued. The storm hit harder than expected. Roads collapsed. Communication towers failed. The ventilation system took damage after the landslide. Lucas looked up instantly at the ceiling pipes running overhead. Several vents were covered in rust stains. Reeves's voice lowered. By week 6, oxygen levels started dropping. Silence filled the tape for several seconds, except faint breathing. Then another voice entered softly. A little girl. Daddy says we are playing quiet game now. Lucas closed his eyes briefly. The bunker suddenly felt much smaller around him. The tapping sound echoed again somewhere below. Closer this time. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Ghost released a deep bark and rushed toward the far corridor. Ghost! Lucas grabbed the flashlight and followed immediately. The hallway narrowed sharply as they descended another flight of concrete stairs. The air grew colder with every step. Emergency lights here flickered weaker, barely holding on. Lucas noticed more signs of life abandoned in place. A child's sneaker beside the wall. Playing cards scattered across the floor. A blanket folded neatly over a chair as though someone expected to return in an hour instead of disappearing decades ago. Then he saw the clock, mounted crookedly above a steel doorway. The second hand was moving backward. Tick, tick, tick. Lucas stopped dead. The bunker generator could not power a broken clock back to life. Yet the hands continued reversing slowly through time. Ghost stood frozen beneath it, staring at the steel door ahead. Deep scratches covered the metal surface near the handle. Not random marks. Finger marks. Lucas swallowed hard. A faded message had been carved shakily into the paint beneath the scratches. Do not lock this door again. The temperature dropped sharply. Lucas could suddenly see his own breath. Then the emergency lights flickered once more and went black for 2 full seconds. Total darkness swallowed the bunker. Ghost growled instantly. Low. Threatening. Protective. The lights returned with a violent buzz. And when they did, Lucas realized something had changed. The steel door ahead now stood slightly open. Neither of them had touched it. The tapping sound stopped completely. Silence pressed around them, so hard Lucas could hear his own heartbeat. Then from inside the dark room beyond the doorway came the soft creak of a child's rocking chair moving slowly back and forth. Lucas tightened his grip on the flashlight, while Ghost refused to step forward. One question burned through Lucas's mind harder than fear itself. If everybody here died years ago, then who had turned the generator back on tonight? The rocking chair moved slowly in the darkness beyond the steel door. Back and forth, back and forth. The sound was soft enough to almost disappear beneath the hum of the generator, but in the silence of the bunker it felt unbearably loud. Ghost would not cross the doorway. The German shepherd stood rigid beside Lucas, muscles tight beneath his soaked coat, eyes fixed on the room ahead with an expression Lucas had never seen before. Fear. Real fear. Lucas lifted the flashlight carefully. The beam slid through the narrow opening and revealed a tiny room with no windows. Concrete walls, rusted shelves, a child's mattress tucked into one corner beneath faded blankets covered in cartoon stars. The rocking chair sat near the center of the room, still moving on its own. But nobody sat in it. Lucas stepped inside slowly. The floor creaked beneath his boots, even though it was solid concrete. Dust floated through the weak flashlight beam like ash. On the far wall, dozens of drawings had been taped side by side. Crayon mountains, pine trees, smiling faces holding hands beneath yellow suns. But every drawing ended the same way. A black square beneath the mountain. Lucas realized after a moment the child had been drawing the bunker over and over again. Then he saw the final picture hanging crooked near the mattress. It showed a little girl beside a German shepherd wearing a red bandana. But this time the dog stood outside the bunker door, while the little girl remained inside waving goodbye. Written beneath it in shaky blue crayon were the words, "He could not stay." Ghost suddenly whimpered behind him. Lucas turned. The dog had walked to the corner of the room where an old ventilation grate sat bolted into the wall near the floor. Ghost pressed his nose against it, breathing hard. Then he pawed at the metal desperately. Lucas crouched beside him and aimed the flashlight through the grate. Darkness at first, then fabric. Olive green fabric. Military issue. His pulse stumbled. No. Lucas reached for the screws securing the vent cover. Rust snapped beneath his multi-tool as Ghost paced anxiously behind him. The moment the grate came loose, a rush of freezing air spilled from the shaft carrying the stale scent of old dust and something heartbreakingly familiar. Human presence left too long behind. Lucas pointed the flashlight inside. A narrow crawl space stretched several feet before vanishing around a bend. Wedged against the concrete was a military backpack covered in dirt. Lucas pulled it free slowly. The fabric cracked with age. Beneath his hands, Ghost lowered himself beside the bag immediately, ears flattened. Inside were batteries, emergency flares, a canteen, and beneath them all sat a folded letter sealed carefully inside plastic. The handwriting across the front looked rushed and uneven. For Emily. Lucas stared at the name for a long moment. The little girl from the drawings. He hesitated before opening it. Part of him knew he should leave everything untouched until authorities arrived. This was evidence now. A burial place. A tragedy frozen in time. But another part of him remembered the lonely desperation in the radio recordings. The waiting. The silence. Ghost nudged the letter gently with his nose as if making the choice for him. Lucas unfolded the paper carefully beneath the flashlight beam. Emily, if you are reading this, then I did not make it back in time. The words hit harder than Lucas expected. He continued reading quietly while the generator droned through the bunker walls. I found another exit after the collapse. I went for help before the storm got worse. I thought I would be gone one night. Maybe two. Tell your mother I am sorry I broke my promise. Lucas stopped reading. His throat tightened unexpectedly. He had heard those same words before. Different war. Different voice. Men apologizing for promises impossible to keep. Ghost suddenly growled low toward the hallway outside the room. Lucas looked up instantly. Footsteps. Soft. Uneven. Somewhere deeper in the bunker corridor. Not echoes. Not pipes. Actual footsteps. Lucas stood immediately, flashlight snapping toward the doorway. Hello. Silence. Then another step. Slow. Dragging slightly across concrete. Ghost moved in front of Lucas protectively now, teeth barely visible as the dog stared into the dim hallway. Lucas's military instincts screamed at him to leave immediately. The storm outside was worsening. The bunker could collapse further. Whoever or whatever had turned the generator back on might still be down here. But he could not walk away now. Not after the letter. Not after realizing these people had spent their final months believing rescue was still coming. Another re-hook came suddenly. The emergency. Lights overhead flickered violently again. Then every speaker in the bunker crackled to life at once. Static exploded through the corridors before a frightened little girl's voice filled the underground halls. "Daddy, somebody is outside the door." Ghost barked sharply. Lucas spun toward the dark corridor just as a steel door somewhere nearby slammed shut on its own. The sound of the steel door slamming echoed through the bunker like a gunshot trapped underground. Ghost lunged into the corridor immediately, barking with a violence Lucas had not heard from him in years. The flashlight beam shook across concrete walls as Lucas followed, boots pounding through dust and stale air while the speakers overhead crackled with static. "Daddy, somebody is outside the door," the little girl's voice repeated faintly before dissolving back into interference. Then silence returned. The hallway ahead stretched empty beneath flickering emergency lights. No movement, no figure, just rows of sealed steel doors and the endless hum of the generator somewhere below them. Ghost stopped abruptly near the end of the corridor beside a heavy blast door hanging slightly open. His growling faded into a low, anxious whine. Lucas slowed carefully, every instinct telling him something waited on the other side. The metal door bore faded white lettering almost erased by age. Ventilation control. Cold air drifted through the opening carrying a strange smell Lucas could not place at first. Not decay, not mold. Pine. Fresh pine. Impossible this far underground. He pushed the door wider. Inside sat a large maintenance chamber filled with rusted machinery and old air filtration units. Thick pipes lined the ceiling like tangled veins disappearing into darkness overhead. Water dripped steadily into shallow puddles across the concrete floor. But near the center of the room stood something untouched by time. A small artificial Christmas tree. Lucas stopped breathing for a second. Dust covered the branches, yet faded silver garlands still wrapped carefully around it. Tiny ornaments hung from the limbs. Hand-painted stars. Wooden angels. Paper snowflakes yellowed with age. At the top sat a photograph. Tucked between the branches. A smiling little girl wearing a winter coat beside a German shepherd with a red bandana. Emily. Ghost approached the tree slowly. His posture changed instantly. The tension left his body for the first time since entering the bunker. He sniffed the ornaments gently, tail lowering. Lucas noticed something else then. Wrapped beneath the tree were presents. Small boxes covered in brittle Christmas paper. Untouched. He crouched beside one carefully. The tag read, "For Emily. Love, Dad." Lucas closed his eyes briefly. The realization settled into him like cold water. They had celebrated Christmas down here. Waiting for rescue. Waiting for a father who never stopped trying to come back. A sudden burst of static exploded from an old intercom mounted near the wall. Lucas nearly jumped. Then a woman's exhausted voice filled the room. "Daniel, if you can hear this. Oxygen levels dropped again last night." The recording crackled weakly. "Emily keeps asking when the stars are coming back." Lucas turned toward the intercom slowly while Ghost stared upward toward the ceiling vents. The woman continued speaking through layers of distortion. "The dog still waits by the hatch every day. He will not eat unless Emily sits beside him." Lucas's chest tightened unexpectedly. Ghost stepped toward one of the ventilation shafts and sat down quietly beneath it, listening. Then came the part that changed everything. "I think he knows something we do not." Silence followed, long enough for Lucas to hear the old machinery rattling around him. Then the woman whispered something softer. "Daniel, if you made it outside, why did the door lock again?" Lucas stared at the speaker. The question echoed through the chamber long after the tape ended. Ghost suddenly barked sharply at the far side of the room. Lucas swung the flashlight around instantly. Another door stood hidden behind storage shelves partially collapsed against the wall. Unlike everything else in the bunker, this door looked newer, cleaner. The metal barely rusted. Lucas approached slowly while Ghost stayed close at his side now. A keypad sat beside the handle, dark for years. Yet as Lucas stepped near it, the screen flickered weakly to life. Access accepted. The lock clicked open by itself. Lucas's pulse hammered. That is not possible, he whispered. The door eased inward with a slow mechanical groan. Warm air spilled from the darkness beyond. Warm air. After decades underground. Lucas raised the flashlight carefully and stepped inside. The room beyond was not abandoned. Supplies lined the walls neatly. Water bottles, batteries, fuel cans, blankets folded with military precision. And in the center of the floor sat a lantern still burning with a weak yellow flame. Someone had been here recently. Very recently. Ghost suddenly stopped moving altogether. His ears lifted high. Then he stared toward the corner of the room where the flashlight had not reached yet. Lucas followed the dog's gaze slowly. A rocking chair sat there in the shadows. This time someone was sitting in it. Not moving. Just watching them from the dark. The figure in the rocking chair did not move. The lantern flame beside it trembled softly, casting long shadows across the hidden room while the generator hummed somewhere deep beneath the bunker floor. Lucas could hear his own breathing now. Slow. Uneven. Ghost stood completely still beside him, but not aggressive anymore. The German shepherd's ears lowered gently. His tail gave one uncertain movement against the concrete. Recognition. Lucas tightened his grip on the flashlight and stepped closer. Sir. The chair creaked softly back and forth. Still no answer. The beam finally reached the figure's face. An old man. Thin. Pale. Deep lines carved through weathered skin like dried riverbeds. White stubble covered his jaw, and heavy blankets wrapped around his narrow shoulders despite the warmth of the room. But it was the eyes that stopped Lucas cold. Gray-green. Military eyes. The kind that scanned people before trusting them. The old man looked at Ghost first. Not Lucas. Tears instantly gathered in the corners of his eyes. Buddy, he whispered hoarsely. Ghost whimpered softly and stepped forward. Lucas frowned. Buddy was not Ghost's name. The old man lifted a trembling hand toward the dog. You stayed. Lucas felt something shift, painfully inside his chest. Who are you? The old man looked at him slowly then. Daniel Reeves. The words hit like ice water. Lucas stared in disbelief. That is impossible. Reeves swallowed hard before answering. I know how it sounds. His voice cracked from years of silence. But I never left this mountain. Ghost moved closer to the old man carefully now, sniffing his trembling fingers while Lucas stood frozen near the doorway. Every recording, every letter, every trace in the bunker had pointed toward Daniel Reeves dying decades ago, trying to return to his family. Yet here he sat alive beneath the Ozarks while his wife and daughter vanished somewhere in the dark behind him. Lucas's pulse sharpened. Where are they? The question nearly broke the old man apart. Reeves closed his eyes slowly. His lips trembled before any words came. Gone. Silence filled the room except for the soft creak of the rocking chair. Lucas took another step forward. What happened here? Reeves stared at the lantern flame for several seconds before speaking again. The landslide sealed the main entrance after the storm. His breathing grew shakier. Ventilation failed. Supplies started running low. I found another route through the maintenance shafts and went out searching for help. Ghost rested his head gently against the old man's knee. Reeves placed a weak hand on the dog's fur instinctively, as though he had done it 1,000 times before. I made it 20 miles through the mountains before I found another emergency station. His eyes darkened with memory. But nobody believed me. Lucas frowned. What do you mean? Reeves looked at him with quiet devastation. They said the bunker was abandoned years earlier. They told me there was nobody left alive down here by the time I escaped. Lucas felt his stomach tighten. So why did you come back? Reeves looked toward the hallway beyond the hidden room. Tears finally slipped down his face. Because Buddy never stopped barking at the hatch. Ghost lifted his head at the name again. Reeves continued softly. Every night after I escaped, that dog sat at the sealed entrance crying into the dark. The old man's voice nearly collapsed. I realized he could still hear them. Lucas stopped breathing for a second. Reeves pointed weakly toward the ventilation tunnels running through the bunker walls. The collapse sealed most of the bunker, but not completely. Sound still traveled through the pipes. The truth settled slowly and horribly into place. Emily and her mother had still been alive when Reeves returned, waiting beneath the mountain while rescue teams declared the bunker empty. Reeves covered his eyes with one shaking hand. I spent weeks trying to dig back inside. Ghost stayed pressed against him quietly while the old man fought to continue speaking. But every time I reached the collapse, the mountain shifted again. Lucas noticed then that Reeves's hands were scarred heavily across the palms and fingers. Not fresh scars. Decades old. I heard Emily's voice one last time through the ventilation shaft. Reeves's face crumpled completely now. She asked if the stars were back yet. Lucas felt tears sting unexpectedly behind his own eyes. The bunker no longer felt haunted. It felt abandoned by the world itself. Then came the twist that shattered everything Lucas thought he understood. Reeves slowly reached into the pocket of his blanket and pulled out an old military photograph. "Your father served with me," he whispered. Lucas froze instantly. The photograph showed two young Marines standing beside a military transport truck. One of them was Daniel Reeves. The other was Lucas's father. Younger. Smiling. Alive. Lucas stared at the image while his heartbeat pounded in his ears. Reeves looked at him through tears. "Your father was the only man who believed me." Lucas's throat tightened painfully. "What are you talking about?" Reeves swallowed hard. "He came back here with me once." The room went silent. Ghost suddenly lifted his head toward the hallway outside and growled softly again. Reeves looked toward the darkness with absolute dread. Then he whispered the words that changed the bunker forever. "Your father never made it back out." The words hollowed the air out of Lucas's lungs. "Your father never made it back out." The lantern flame flickered softly between them while the bunker groaned somewhere deep in its concrete bones. Lucas stared at Daniel Reeves without blinking, trying to force the sentence into something that made sense. His father had died 20 years ago in a highway accident outside Tulsa. That was the story. That was what his mother told him. A rainy road. A drunk driver. Closed casket funeral. Lucas suddenly realized he had never actually seen the body. Ghost moved closer to him quietly and pressed against his leg as if sensing the shift inside him. Reeves lowered his eyes. "Your father came here in the winter of 1998. His voice sounded smaller now, worn down by decades of guilt. He was the only person who listened after the rescue teams gave up." Lucas swallowed hard. "You are telling me my father knew this place existed?" Reeves nodded once. He believed there were still survivors trapped below the collapse. The bunker lights flickered again overhead. Lucas paced a few steps away, running a hand across his face while anger and grief tangled together so tightly he could barely separate them. "Why did nobody tell me any of this?" Reeves looked toward the floor. "Because your father made me promise." Lucas turned sharply. "Promise what?" The old man's eyes filled again. "That if we failed, this bunker would stay buried." Silence settled heavily between them. Ghost remained beside Lucas now, watching him carefully with those steady amber eyes that always seemed to know when pain was close. Lucas remembered being 12 years old after his father died, sitting awake beside the family dog during thunderstorms because the silence in the house felt unbearable. He remembered his father's old military jacket hanging untouched in the hallway closet for years afterward. And now here beneath a mountain in Arkansas sat the ghost of a story nobody had ever told him. Reeves reached slowly toward a small lockbox beside the rocking chair. "Your father left something here." Lucas froze again. The old man opened the rusted box carefully and removed a cassette tape wrapped in faded cloth. Written across the label in black marker were two words. "For Lucas." Lucas stared at it in disbelief. His hands trembled as he took the tape. "He recorded this the night before the second tunnel collapsed," Reeves whispered. "He knew there was a chance neither of us would make it back through." Lucas looked at the old cassette player sitting near the lantern. Dust coated the edges, but the batteries still glowed faintly alive. Ghost lay down quietly beside Lucas's boots, as if he understood this moment belonged to both of them now. Lucas slid the tape into the player with shaking fingers. Static crackled softly. Then came his father's voice. Younger than Lucas remembered. Calm. Tired. "Hey, buddy." Lucas closed his eyes instantly. The sound hit harder than any explosion he had survived overseas. "If you are hearing this, then things did not work out the way I hoped." The recording hissed softly beneath the hum of the bunker generator. "You are probably old enough now to wonder why your old man disappeared all the time chasing storms and broken people." Lucas sat down slowly on the cold concrete floor beside Ghost while tears burned behind his eyes. His father continued speaking. "There is a little girl trapped down here named Emily. She keeps asking when the stars are coming back." Reeves covered his face quietly with one trembling hand. "Daniel has not slept in almost 6 days trying to clear the collapse. Neither has the dog." Lucas looked toward Ghost automatically at the word dog. His father gave a faint, tired laugh on the tape. Funny thing about shepherds, son. They do not abandon people, even when the world does. Ghost lifted his head slowly and looked directly at Lucas. The bunker seemed to fall silent around them except for the old recording. If I do not make it home, his father said softly, I need you to know something important. Lucas stopped breathing again. Do not waste your life outrunning grief the way I did. The words landed like a hand reaching across decades. Lucas lowered his head. Every deployment, every lonely motel room after retirement, every night he sat awake with whiskey and silence because facing loss felt impossible. His father somehow knew exactly who he would become. Then the tape changed. A loud rumble echoed in the background. Concrete shifting. Metal groaning. Reeves suddenly looked terrified. That was the collapse, he whispered. His father's breathing sharpened on the recording. Lucas, if this tunnel gives way, static swallowed several words. Then one final sentence emerged clearly through the interference. Take care of the shepherd for me. The tape ended abruptly. Total silence followed. Lucas sat motionless beside Ghost while tears finally slid down his face for the first time in years. Ghost pressed his muzzle gently into Lucas's shoulder without making a sound. Two souls carrying the same loneliness. Above them, the bunker lights flickered violently again. Then somewhere deep beneath the floor came a sound neither man nor dog had heard before. A child coughing. The coughing came again. Small. Weak. Impossible. Lucas rose so fast the cassette player nearly fell from his hands. Ghost was already moving, ears lifted sharply toward the lower tunnels beneath the bunker floor. Daniel Reeves stared toward the darkness with pale, terrified eyes. No, he whispered. That cannot be, but the sound came a third time. Faint. Childlike. Echoing through the ventilation shafts somewhere below them. Lucas grabbed the flashlight immediately. There is another level down there. Reeves hesitated before nodding slowly. An old emergency medical wing. His breathing grew uneven again. Collapsed after the second cave-in. Ghost barked sharply toward the hallway, as if urging them forward. Lucas followed without another word. The bunker felt different now. Not haunted. Urgent. The emergency lights buzzed weakly overhead, while the generator pulsed through the walls like a failing heartbeat. Reeves moved slower behind them, wrapped in his blanket, one hand trailing against the concrete for balance while Ghost led the way deeper underground. The lower stairwell was nearly buried beneath fallen debris and rusted pipes. Dust hung thick in the cold air. Lucas squeezed through a narrow opening between broken concrete slabs while Ghost crawled ahead into the darkness beyond. Then the dog stopped. A soft whine escaped his throat. Lucas lifted the flashlight. The medical wing stretched before them, half collapsed. Beneath the mountain, hospital cots sat overturned beside cabinets of expired supplies. Children's drawings still covered one wall, near a faded sign reading family quarters. The smell here was different. Cleaner somehow. Preserved by the cold, underground air. Then Lucas saw the source of the coughing. An old tape recorder sitting alone on a bedside table. The play button pressed down by itself. Static crackled softly before a child's weak cough sounded through the tiny speaker again. Not live. A recording. Lucas exhaled slowly, though the sadness that replaced the fear somehow hurt more. Ghost approached the bedside table carefully. Beside the recorder sat a flashlight wrapped in a red bandana, the same one from Emily's drawings. Lucas picked it up gently. Beneath it lay a final journal entry written in a woman's trembling handwriting. December 23rd, 1997. Emily finally fell asleep tonight after asking if her father could still find us under all this snow. But he stayed beside the hatch again for hours. He scratches at the door every night now. I think he still believes Daniel is coming back. Lucas swallowed hard. Ghost rested quietly beside the bed while Reeves slowly lowered himself into a chair nearby, staring at the old recorder with hollow eyes. Claire wrote that, he whispered. Lucas turned another page carefully. The handwriting became shakier near the end. We heard digging this morning. Real digging. Emily smiled for the first time in weeks. She said she knew Daddy would not leave us here forever. Reeves covered his face silently. Lucas continued reading. Then came the final sentence. The mountain shook again tonight. Buddy keeps barking at the vent like he hears someone calling his name. If this is our last Christmas, I pray somebody someday tells Daniel we waited for him until the very end. Silence swallowed the room after Lucas finished. Even the generator seemed quieter now. Ghost slowly walked toward the far wall where a collapsed ventilation shaft disappeared beneath broken concrete. He sniffed carefully at the rubble before lying down beside it. Lucas followed the dog's gaze. A tiny skeletal hand rested barely visible beneath the debris. Beside it sat a small metal star ornament covered in dust. Emily. Lucas closed his eyes briefly while emotion tightened through his chest like wire. Reeves began crying softly behind him. Not loud, not dramatic, just the exhausted grief of a man who had spent 30 years carrying the same wound alone. Ghost stayed beside the rubble without moving, guarding, waiting, the way Buddy once had. Lucas knelt beside the collapsed shaft and gently removed the small ornament from the dust. Its silver paint still shimmered faintly beneath the flashlight beam. On the back, scratched carefully by a child's hand, were the words, "For Daddy when he comes home." Lucas finally understood then why Ghost had led him here. Why the distress signal returned after all these years. Why the bunker lights flickered back to life tonight. This place had not been calling for rescue anymore. It had been waiting for someone to remember them. Above them, thunder rolled faintly through the mountain as dawn slowly approached outside. Lucas looked toward Reeves quietly. "We are getting them out of here." The old man nodded weakly through tears. Ghost lifted his head for the first time in several minutes and looked toward the upper corridors again. Lucas noticed the dog's ears suddenly rise. Another sound drifted faintly through the bunker. Soft music. The lullaby. But this time it was not coming from the radio. Morning arrived slowly over the Ozarks like mercy too late to stop the hurt, but gentle enough to soften it. Rain still clung to the pine branches above the mountain as pale gray light filtered through the storm clouds and spilled across the muddy clearing where the bunker hatch stood open at last. Rescue crews moved quietly now around the site with lowered voices and careful hands. Nobody joked. Nobody rushed. Even the deputies standing near the ambulances seemed changed after hearing what had been found beneath the mountain. Lucas stood apart from them near the tree line with Ghost beside him, watching as workers carried small boxes draped in white cloth toward waiting vehicles. Daniel Reeves sat wrapped in a blanket on the back step of an ambulance nearby. He had barely spoken since sunrise. His tired eyes stayed fixed on the bunker entrance, as if part of him still expected his wife and daughter to walk out alive after all these years. Ghost remained unusually close to the old man whenever Lucas drifted too far away. The German shepherd moved between them quietly now, as though guarding two broken pieces of the same memory. Lucas held the silver star ornament tightly in one hand while the cold morning wind pushed through the forest around him. He had not slept. He doubted he would for a long time. An officer approached carrying an old military dog tag sealed carefully inside an evidence bag. "We found this near the collapsed ventilation shaft," the man said softly. Lucas looked down. The metal was scratched and faded with age, but the name remained clear enough beneath the dirt. Thomas Mercer. His father. Lucas stared at the tag while emotion rose through him so sharply he had to look away toward the mountains just to steady himself. All his life, he believed his father disappeared because of a random accident on some empty highway. But the truth had been buried here beneath stone and silence. A man who went back for strangers because he could not live with leaving them behind. Ghost nudged Lucas gently beneath the hand holding the dog tag. Lucas knelt automatically and rested his forehead briefly against the shepherd's neck. "He stayed too, huh?" he whispered. Ghost closed his eyes quietly. Around noon, the crews recovered the final remains from the lower medical wing. A tiny red bandana was found folded carefully beside them. Daniel Reeves broke down completely when he saw it. Lucas walked him away from the crowd toward the edge of the forest where the wind carried the scent of wet cedar and pine through the trees. For several minutes, neither man spoke. Then Reeves finally whispered, "I kept hearing Emily's voice all these years." Lucas looked toward the mountains. Maybe because she was still waiting. Reeves nodded weakly through tears. "Do you think they knew I came back?" Lucas thought about the journal entries. The scratching at the hatch. Buddy barking through the vents. The little girl waiting for stars she never saw again. Then he looked at Ghost sitting silently beside them beneath the swaying pines. "I think they never stopped listening for you," he answered softly. The old man cried harder after that. By evening, the storm finally cleared completely. The sky above the Ozarks opened into deep blue streaked with fading gold, while crews packed equipment and generators back into trucks. But one thing still troubled Lucas. Nobody could explain how the bunker systems powered on after decades underground. Engineers inspected the backup generator twice and found no fuel remaining inside the reserve tanks. The radio equipment should not have worked either. Most of it had corroded years earlier. Yet every distress recording Lucas heard during the night had played clearly. Some of them had not even existed on the recovered tapes. A technician handed Lucas one final cassette before leaving. "Found this in the radio room," he said. "Thought you should have it." The labels simply read, "Last Signal." Night settled over the mountains before Lucas finally climbed into his truck with Ghost curled quietly in the passenger seat. The bunker hatch behind them had already been sealed again beneath floodlights and caution tape. But the mountain no longer felt cursed. Just sad, like a wound finally spoken aloud after decades of silence. Lucas started the engine slowly. Ghost lifted his head once and looked back toward the forest. Then came the sound. Soft, faint, barely louder than the wind. The lullaby. Lucas froze instantly. It drifted through the trees for only a few seconds before fading into the night air. No radio nearby. No speakers. Just the melody moving gently beneath the pines. Ghost did not bark this time. He only watched the mountain with calm amber eyes, as if hearing something familiar far beyond human reach. Lucas reached into the passenger seat and pressed play on the final cassette. Static crackled softly through the truck speakers while headlights cut across the dark forest road ahead. Then a little girl's voice filled the cab, clearer than before, older somehow, peaceful. "Daddy," the stars came back. The tape ended there. Lucas sat motionless behind the wheel while the wind moved through the Ozarks outside and Ghost rested his head quietly against his arm. Far behind them, hidden beneath stone and pine and years of forgotten grief, one small emergency light inside the sealed bunker flickered on by itself. Deep in the storm-soaked Ozark Mountains, a retired Marine and his loyal German shepherd uncover a forgotten underground bunker hiding a heartbreaking secret buried for decades beneath stone and silence. What begins as one of the most emotional animal stories soon becomes a haunting journey about loyalty, sacrifice, and a family that never stopped waiting to be found. As strange radio signals echo through the darkness, and old recordings reveal the final days of a trapped mother and daughter, the former Marine discovers a shocking truth connected to his own father and a military mission erased from memory. Guided by the instincts of his faithful K-9 companion, he uncovers abandoned Christmas gifts, hidden letters, and the devastating reason a shepherd dog refused to leave the bunker entrance long after hope disappeared. This cinematic mystery blends emotional animal stories with suspense, faith, and unforgettable human connection as the aging soldier, still haunted by guilt, finally learns what happened to the family he could not save. Filled with emotional twists, forgotten military secrets, eerie underground discoveries, and powerful moments between a Marine and his dog, this story captures why animal stories about German shepherd loyalty continue to touch millions of hearts. From the flicker of emergency lights beneath the mountain to the final whispered message carried through the static, every moment reveals another layer of grief, love, and redemption. Fans of heartfelt animal stories, military mystery dramas, rescue tales, and cinematic storytelling will experience an unforgettable journey through loss, forgiveness, and the bond between humans and dogs. This emotional adventure combines suspenseful survival mystery with deeply moving animal stories that explore what it truly means to wait for someone you love. Long after the final signal fades into the dark Ozark forest, the story of the Marine, the old soldier, and the loyal German shepherd remains one of those rare animal stories that stays with you long after the screen goes black.